Bum, ba-dum. Bum, ba-dum. Bum, ba-dum. Bum, 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 ba-dum, ba-da-ba-dum, ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum, ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum, ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum, 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 ba-da-bum. Ho-ho! Hello, everyone. This is Rolo, the Puerto Rican pistolero, coming to you live from beautiful Miami, Florida. It is a pleasure to be here on this beautiful Mother's Day. Look at that. The party is already getting started early with Josie 1818 Pure Blood with the $5. What's up, y'all? Let's get it going. And then Greg, the Goblin, following up with the 20. Doesn't say anything, just drops it on the table. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate the hot start so far. We've got Comic Misconceptions here leading the chat as usual, and he's here twice. I like the light blue or teal name, Comic Misconceptions. It does look cool. We've got the Forgotten Man, Atomic Patriot, obviously Joe and Greg the Goblin dropping those super chats, JM the Elite Fan, and we have Apollo here. G-Webs, the OG, stopping by. Thank you so much, G-Webs. He's been here from the start. I appreciate you. We have a lot of things to talk about today. It's going to be a very eclectic show. We've got several different topics, probably some things that people are talking about and some things that other people aren't talking about so much. We're in hyperspace here. We're hanging out. We got the Mark 18 in full display over here. I can't point. I don't know my directions here when things are mirrored behind me. So I want to start the show with a message to all the mothers out there. Happy Mother's Day. I don't know how many mothers watch this show besides my own, but if you're a mom out there, or if you have a mom, which all of you do, if we're blessed enough to have them still with us today, happy Mother's Day to them. And yes, it was a nice day. I went to church this morning, and like I always do every Sunday, and it was interesting to have our pastor at church. I'm not going to get too philosophical here, but he really emphasized a different message than a lot of people were expecting. And instead of talking about moms, he actually talked about fathers and the role of men, especially in today's society where men have been, ostracized and called toxic and all these things. It was a very refreshing message about what masculinity means, what it is to be a man, to honor the relationships that you have with your mothers, wives, and significant others. And I thought it was fantastic. So I think that it's important not to lose sight of where we are in this world, especially as men. We need to be leaders in the darkness that we're seeing around here. And we need to set a positive example for the rest of society. I believe that he dropped a statistic that I thought was very interesting. And he said that if now those of you that aren't Christian, there's no problem. It's just kind of to emphasize the importance of, masculine leadership. I'm not saying that women cannot be leaders. They absolutely can be. They can be great leaders. But in a household that doesn't have a father, a child has a 2% chance of becoming a Christian. In a household where a child becomes the first Christian in their family, there's a 3% chance that the rest of the family will do so. If the mother leads the way, there's a 17% chance that the family will do so. But if the father leads the way, there's a 93% chance that the rest of the family will follow suit in that pursuit of religion. So it just shows the importance of fatherhood, that leadership, and the importance that we have, the responsibility that we have as men to assume those roles and to do better. Getting home at the end of the day, we may want to relax and all those things because we've had a hard day at work. But we have to be partners with our spouses, if you have one, with your girlfriends, whoever it may be, but especially if you're married. So just a good message I thought to throw out there. Pastor Bob articulates it better than I ever could, but it was I just wanted to put it out there. So happy Mother's Day out there. And to the dads, we'll say, you've got your day coming up soon, but thank you so much. My mother has done so much for me over the years, and I'm very thankful to have her. She's always been a positive force in my life. My dad was, obviously in the Navy, And he was deployed a lot when I was a kid, probably 6 or 7 years of my life. Almost he was out on various deployments and away from home. So very early on, my mother, had to kind of assume both roles in the household and teach me what it was to be a man in a lot of ways, a man of the house, and to take up that slack for when my father was away. And I think that she did, I think she did a great job setting that example for my brother and myself, and establishing that foundation, that my father was able to, work with too when he was finally back and he retired from the military and had more time to spend with us. So, I appreciate you, Mom. You're fantastic. I've been through so much, especially over the last year, that without both my parents, but my mother, to kind of be there, to help me through, the good and the bad that's happened. I really appreciate her and the love and support that she's always given me. So, give your mothers a hug if they're still around. Tell them that you love them. Don't take anything for granted, because you never know when you might lose somebody. A few weeks ago, my mother lost one of her aunts. She passed away, pretty suddenly and surprising. We'd seen her in December when we were in Puerto Rico, and you don't want to take for granted the moments that you have, especially as we get older. I'm 37 years old, believe it or not. So, my parents aren't spring chickens anymore. They're still fairly young, but the years go by and you need to cherish those moments that you have. So, I appreciate all of you for being here. Appreciate my mother and my parents. And now we'll get started with the rest of the show. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things. Again, the format's kind of been different for me. You guys know I usually go on like political rants where I talk about the Second Amendment. But lately I've been talking a little bit more about everything. So I think we're going to continue a little bit of the conversation last week. And I got to get used to the 7:30 start, because it threw me off psychologically last time. And I kind of did a weird like reverse rant. So I'll be a little bit more cognizant of it this time. But, we'll start kind of talking about the entire continuing the debacle. Cody Warner, how's it going? I'll check out your well, let's start with Cody Warner's question. You guys can always derail me. That's how we do the show here. Cody Warner says, what's up, man? Haven't seen a stream in a while since I've been busy. Here's a question. Cold 1911 Cup Series, Gold Cup Series 70. Series 70s are always better than Series 80s. SIG 325 X5 with a Romeo sight, or Smith 460. Those are some in my collection. Oh, well, you have them all, so you're just asking which one I prefer. I would take the 1911 in that scenario. Somebody was shooting. I was at the range. It wasn't when I was there. It was the last week that somebody had a Smith & Wesson 460 next to me, and it sounded like a blast. Literally, it was great. It was concussive. It was loud. Those dudes were having a good time shooting that gun, and I thought it looked pretty fantastic. It was a beautiful wheel gun. I'd like to get myself a hand cannon one day. It's just one of those that, I'm so practical about ammunition and trying to keep, basically quote unquote military rounds only, that, but I need to open a place for a 357 in my heart and in my collection. And I think I'll probably go 2 for 2 the way that I did with the 22s, and it'll be the cowboy combo, except the revolver will be more modern. So maybe something like a Chiappa Rhino. I'm a sucker for that, because I kind of want something that looks science fiction, or like a Destiny hand cannon, because I've been obsessed with the game lately. So I feel like the Chiappa Rhino would work with that. I feel like the Kimber's revolver, I forgot what it's called. It's a pretty beautiful revolver as well. Any Smith would be good. Colt Pythons or anything like that. So I'd be in between a few, and then I'd buy like a Henry lever action and 357 or 44 Magnum, depending on which caliber I'd go with, and go with the pistol caliber carbine and pistol combo classic style, instead of going with like a 9mm PCC and a pistol, which I already have that combo, a couple of times over as it is. But yeah, that's I'd go with the 1911 just because I'm, really particular. And a Colt 1911 Series 70 is you're not gonna miss with that gun. SIG P320s, I like SIGs. 320s, I'm not the biggest fan of. I have seen some weird things with their Romeo sights that they're not as durable as others, but I haven't shot one enough to be able to judge that. I was watching, I think it was Lucas T-Rex Arms was doing a like a micro carry pistol comparison. I believe that the 365 has a Sig Romeo sight on it, and because of how sharp the recoil is on those smaller pistols, it was starting to lose, some juice there after a few hundred rounds, which was a little bit disconcerting. But I don't know if that's the case. Sig makes pretty affordable optics. I do have a Sig LPVO on my 308 on the PSA 308. The Saber, and I mean, it's pretty good, but we'll see long term. That's also kind of more of their affordable line, so their budget Tango MSR LPVOs. It's a 1-8, and who knows how long that thing will last on top of the 308 before it gets busted up. But with the price of 308 ammo, it's not getting shot as often as I'd like. So we'll see what the durability is. I've got a Swamp Fox LPVO on my AR-15. It's been solid. A few guys bought those and stuck them on their Scar 18s in the 10th Mountain Division during the War on Terror. So Scar is notorious for having really harsh recoil impulse for optics for some reason, even though it's a pleasant gun to shoot. It just destroys them. So if it survived that, I'm pretty confident it'll survive my Bravo Company AR-15. So that's the setup I've gotten. Obviously, this is the Mark 18. It's just a magnifier with a hollow sun optic. Rugers, I love. I gotta say, see, now we've started the gun talk. You guys have successfully distracted me. Smash the like button. We got 26 people in here and only 17 likes. We can do better than that. These are rookie numbers, ladies and gentlemen. But I love Ruger. There's just something about them. They make very affordable firearms, but they're reliable. The 1022 is basically an American staple when it comes to growing up and plinking in your backyard. I have a Ruger 1022 takedown, which I adore. It's one of my favorite guns. It's in stainless steel, which sometimes stainless steel I love and I don't. When you're in Florida and it's super bright outside, you get a ton of shine. You can rattle can it, obviously, but stainless steel does look pretty good. So I love that rifle. I love how it folds into its case. You can just throw it into a backpack, and I've got the X22 backpacker stock on it. So it actually has a compartment in the stock that you can put 3 of the 10-round rotary magazines that Ruger has in it. And so it becomes a really good survival rifle. And you'd be surprised. I saw an article the other day, actually. So now we're on a tangent here about bear defense and how pretty much, I mean, we always love to talk about, 44 Magnum and above, 10 millimeter when it comes to bear defense. But you'd be surprised how decently 22 long rifle does. So I actually do have the article here, and I will bring it up. So handgun defense against bears by caliber, 22 rimfire. There have been 11 recorded incidents throughout history, or at least in the United States. So many readers are interested in how various handgun calibers have performed in defense against bears. This is a complicated subject. Sometimes any caliber will do. Sometimes a level of power may be required. Sometimes a level of accuracy or speed may be required. Many permutations exist. The most important aspect, and again, this is from Ammo Land, written by Dean Weingarten. I believe that I've run into Dean and met him before at a Second Amendment advocacy event. I want to say it may have been Florida Carry. I'm not 100% sure, but I have met. Obviously, we know the famous John Crump, one of the most prolific and best Second Amendment writers that you'll ever find. He's exposed the ATF around every corner. I'm sure he's public enemy number 1 for them, and friend of the show. You can go ahead and check him out on John Crump Live every day, I believe at 5 to 6 p.m. So huge shout out to John. But let's go here. Here are all the cases which have been documented where 22 rimfire caliber handguns were fired in defense against bears. So this is even more impressive because we know that you're obviously going to get a lot more velocity from a rifle than you are a handgun. So 22 is already a bit anemic coming out of a rifle, but coming out of a pistol is going to be impressive if you've got if you've survived against bears. So the 22 long rifle caliber has dozens of loads. It's not possible to know which particular load was used in each case. Some 22 short loads are more powerful than some 22 long loads. The same applies to a lesser extent with 22 Magnum rimfire loads. If instances of the use of 17 caliber or 5mm rimfire are found, they will be included with the 22 rimfire information. The 11 incidents are listed in chronological order. 8 are 22 long rifle, 3 are 22 Magnum. There is 1 failure against a polar bear, which ended fatally. Wow. 1 success against a grizzly bear and 8 successes against black bears. 3 people suffered several relatively minor injuries. Daisy Staver was killed after her husband drove the black bear away with warning shots from the 22, then left to get help. He took the 22 handgun with him. The black bear came back and killed and then started eating Daisy. Wow, that's horrible. Man, that's awful. That's really bad. 1936 in Alaska, a 22 rimfire from More Alaskan Bear Tales, page 267, reference January 31st, 1936. A black bear with cubs had chased Mr. Nutter up a tree. When the sow came after him, he was able to shoot and kill it with a 22 pistol. The bear bit him at least twice before he killed it. The pistol was a 22 semi-auto. 1960, 22, black bear at lake north of Minto, Alaska. In 1960, Frances Cannon and her 2 friends flew into a lake a little north of Minto, Alaska. They were on a fishing trip. After fishing, they set down to lunch. Then when they were attacked by a black bear who rushed out of the brush and grabbed Francis. From Alaska Bear Tales, pages 107 to 108, Johnson picked up a stick and pummeled the brute, and the bear dropped the woman and charged him. It was waylaid by the lunch, which it began to devour. In the meantime, Fletcher got a 22 pistol from the plane, walked within a few feet of the animal, and killed it. I suspect it was not a casual stroll to the plane or slow walk back to the bear. 1962 in the summer, 22 long rifle, grizzly bear in Montana near Glacier National Park. The incident with the grizzly bear happened in the 1962 spring trapping season. Another worker was helping Chuck when then. I met the guy once, but I've forgotten his name. A 500-pound male grizzly bear was caught in a steel-jawed trap and took it and the tangled up drag about 2 miles where the bear hid in an aspen patch. Chuck and his helper tracked the grizzly on foot. The helper's armed with a 12-gauge shotgun, and all Chuck had was his 9-shot Harrington and Richardson model 939 double-action 22 revolver and a holster on his belt. The grizzly charged, and Chuck stood still, waiting for his helper to shoot. He looked around, and the helper was running off with a shotgun. Oh, man. Chuck turned around and tripped over a tree root and fell to the ground. The 500-pound male grizzly ran up to Chuck and stood up on his hind legs over him with the trap on his front paw. Chuck pulled out his 22 revolver, fired all 9 shots in it. Some missed, some glanced off the grizzly's skull, and one went into an eye socket, killing the bear. Wow, that's crazy. Early 1960s, Montreal River, Keweenaw County, Michigan. Black bear, 22 Magnum in the spring. This event happened to James Merrill, a well-known educator, principal, and sportsman who lived in Calumet, Michigan. The Montreal River is fairly wide today, and was even more fairly wild today, and was even more wild in the early 1960s. Keweenaw County is the largest county in Michigan, and it has the lowest population. The drive from the Montreal River to Calumet would be about an hour, more or less. This was somewhere on the Montreal River up in Keweenaw County where he was stream fishing alone. I believe it was in the spring. He said he was walking along the river when he noticed a small cub. He stopped and looked around and immediately realized he had inadvertently ended up between the cub and the sow. Oh, that's just a bad situation. He started backing away from both of them, and the sow started advancing on him. He put some distance from him, but she wouldn't stop despite him yelling and waving his arms to warn her off. When he realized she wasn't backing down, he drew the Ruger and waited until it was quite close before he fired. He was a very good shot, so I have no doubt he wanted to make sure he could hit it where he was aiming. The bear went down as I described. He then took the cub and wrapped up in a jacket and put it in the trunk of his car. Not sure what to do with it. Didn't want to leave it. He brought it to a local park where some of his friends were to show them. It was the 1960s. Yeah, that seems pretty 60s. Poor bear. Oh, man. The rules were different back then. You wouldn't take it to an animal shelter. 1971 in Idaho. See, this was a tangent that you guys didn't expect today. I didn't expect this tangent either. Walt Earl was a government trapper and hunter who also guided hunters. He had to kill a black bear and cubs in a depredation hunt. The hunter forgot his ammunition for the hunter's 44 Magnum. Walt took refuge on the trunk of a huge pine that had blown down. The sow came after him. She climbed up and walked straight down the trunk toward me and my pea shooter. Her head was swaying and teeth popping. I held my shot. From behind the flimsy barricade of twigs, I aimed for her throat and yelled for the dogs to take her. They moved, but didn't answer the challenge. She stood 20 feet away with all her attention focused on my throat. I had, in a way, brought a knife to a gunfight. With 8 rounds left in my 10-round clip, I pulled the trigger with my sights on the swaying Bruin's throat. 1, 2, 3, 4. If anything, these rounds just angered her more. 5, 6, 7, 8. Click. On the 8th shot, something happened. Rocket, that old redbone hound, charged into the bear, sinking his teeth into the sow's side. They both went flying from the log, claws flying and teeth snapping in midair. As the dogs fought the sow, Earl reloaded. Then, as the sow came at him, again, he fired 10 more shots from his Ruger 22 pistol. The dogs distracted the sow once more. The fight moved into a thicket. The sow was found there dead from 222 rounds that reached her vitals. There were 14 .22 caliber holes in her. A bio of Walt Earl is included at the end of the book. July 8th, 1992, Glen Allen, Alaska, 22 against a black bear. 33-year-old Darcy Staver and her husband, we heard about this, that she came back, and unfortunately she was killed. When Michael returned, she was on the ground dead with the bear trying to eat her. The animal was shot and killed. Larry Canuet was very careful not to hit the bear for fear of enraging it. I guess the first time around. August 1995. Norway, Svalbard Archipelago. Nice. 22 rimfire failure, not so nice, against a polar bear from Spitsbergen. Svalbard, Franz Josef, Jan Mayen, and Third Brabant Travel Guide by Andres Umbrate. Another 5 people of the crew set out separately with only a 22 pistol and a flare gun. About an hour after an hour's march, the second party were met by a bear 75 meters away and openly aggressive. The bear was distracted. Neither bore a warning shot nor flare and attacked one of the party. As he did so, he was shot from a range of only 15 meters and turned at the man who fired at him. The man tossed the gun into the first, who shot again. The process was repeated, the first man being attacked and then the other. By the time the pistol was emptied and the knife drawn, one man was dead and another badly injured. The survivors retreated to the ship. On examination, 3 shots to the cranium were discovered, none of them piercing the cranium. The victim had 3 years of experience with the Origo, with many bear observations, and there were sufficient weapons on board the group to equip everybody. Older reference, polar bears preceding the 12th working group. Same incident on September 1st, 1995. 2 male tourists were attacked by an adult male bear on a remote island in eastern Svalbard. The 2 tourists defended themselves with a 22 caliber pistol, which proved ineffective. 1 man was killed, the other injured. Police later shot the bear. I'm guessing they used a real rifle. 24 June 2012 in Arizona, Ponderosa Campground, 22 rimfire black bear, reported by AZGFD. .net. Caliber previously unknown. The bear had entered a man's tent and attacked him. His fiancee and a 1-year-old child were also in the tent and were able to escape unharmed and sound the alarm to other campers in the area. Reports indicate that another camper at a nearby campsite shot the bear several times with a handgun at close range after the attack. The bear left the area and it is unknown at this time how many times the bear was hit. 25 July 2016 in New Mexico, Silver City. 22 rimfire with a black bear. The startled cubs bawled out for their mother, which came running around the corner. The woman fled into her house, but her dog slipped out the open door. A fight ensued between the adult bear and the dogs, during which the woman attempted to scare the bear away. The woman's husband, armed with a 22 caliber pistol, fired a single shot in the bear's direction. Peralta said the bear ran off and collapsed about 40 yards away. Denver got one shot. Wow, 1 shot, 1 kill. One of the 3 cubs was found near the house, and the other was found in a tree. Feel bad for the Cubs, but that's always a bad situation. August 30th, 2022, 2 cases, 2 black bears in Minnesota, 22 Magnum Boundary Waters canoe area. James Little was interviewed. On Tuesday, August 30th, at about 6:50 p.m., James Little settled into a campsite, 647 in the Boundary Waters canoe area. His youngest child was a few feet away. His youngest cried out, and James grabbed the child and took a couple of steps, uncertain of what had happened. Then his oldest yelled, "Bear!" James turned around. The bear was about 6 feet from him. It had been within 3 to 4 feet of his back when the child was startled, and this was the start of the remarkable incident. In James' words, just finished a trip to Horseshoe that should have been 3 nights, but turned to 1. Campsite 674 had a bear walk right into the camp, and within 4 feet of my youngest. Nothing would discourage him until I fired a couple of rounds. We packed and bolted to an open site, campsite 677, half a mile away on the other side of the lake. Weren't there 5 minutes and was pulling up the food bag, and my wife screamed. There was another bear 15 feet away heading to our canoe with our kids in it. I had to fire another round before he'd be deterred. Left that site, and an unexpected BWCA.com member Ausable and his crew took my family and me in for the night at campsite 672. Early the next morning, we broke camp and headed out. My family had had too much across from the portage from Caribou to Liz. Campsite 645, the campers there had their breakfast intruded by a bear who would not be deterred till he had taken their food bag. There are many anecdotal cases of 22 rimfire handguns being used effectively to protect against bears. The above are the cases we have been able to document. If you know of more cases, whether successes or failures, please send the information to Ammo Land. Here's a link to the latest update. So there you go. There you go. Those are the incidents where 22 has been used against bears. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not so successfully. But I think for the most part it has been. So what does that tell you? That yes, if you can, you should carry the largest caliber that you can carry. This goes for anything, in my opinion. Like, you should always carry the biggest gun you can carry and the largest caliber, well, the largest caliber that you can reasonably be proficient with, because ultimately what is most important, as we've seen here, is shot placement and reliability. Now, where 22 rimfire typically falls short is in the reliability category. It's just the way that the ammunition is made and the way that, rimfire primers are. A lot of times you'll get what's called a light primer strike, where if you don't, for those of you that don't know how a gun works, you've got a bullet. It's a cartridge. The entire thing is called a cartridge. And you typically have three parts to a cartridge, right? I would say, let's say four. You have the primer, you've got the casing, and then you've got the bullet and obviously the gunpowder that's inside of it. Most modern rounds are center fire, so they've got a primer kind of in the middle. I probably have a bullet somewhere, I'm sure, that I can show off that will emphasize this. I got plenty of magazines and all that stuff, but it doesn't look like I've got a round right next to me at this moment. But so you'll see the primer. Your firing pin inside the round pushes forward, springs forward. When you pull the trigger, that pin hits that primer, which causes an explosion, ignites the powder. The powder explodes, or burns off, explodes. Then the bullet flies through the barrel where it is spun by the rifling, typically, and boom, boom goes the dynamite, so to speak. So rimfire uses a rim, a rimmed primer. So instead of having that little, primer in the middle of the center, so it looks like a bullseye on like most modern cartridges. It's just the rim that has the primer, and sometimes those, primers are prone to light strikes and they don't necessarily go off. So reliability is usually the biggest issue that you'll get with 22. But as far as being an effective round, if you can find good, reliable 22 ammunition, I'm not saying it would be my first recommendation, but you work with the tools that you have at your disposal. And if a 22 is what you got, it's what you've got. You can carry literally thousands of rounds of ammo on you compared to hundreds or dozens with other calibers. And depending on the capacity of the magazines that you have, you can do what a lot of these people did and unload an entire magazine, and you will shoot it within a small group. And if you pepper the target, maybe one of them is going to penetrate something vital and cause some damage. So again, not recommended, but as you can see, having anything works. So, hey, carry something that you're effective with, that you won't hesitate to be proficient with. That's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. And sometimes that means carrying a firearm that some people may consider less effective. That was the case with 9mm years ago, that people thought, well, 9mm can't compare to 45 or 40, or, obviously 357 Magnum. It is still not as strong, as powerful as those rounds, but with modern loadings, you have 9mm rounds that are capable of, more than capable of defending your life against, adversaries, whether they be two-legged or four-legged. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. So there you got me on a 30-minute tangent about guns and bear defense that I didn't expect. Now we're going to move on to an extension of the conversation that we had last week, talking about, well, last week we focused on Sony and what had happened with the incident with Helldivers. Unfortunately, it appears that saga is not over, despite the fact that Microsoft seeing what Sony was going through, decided to say, hey, hold my beer. I'm going to do you one better, and I'm going to bail Sony out of here for a few days, only for Sony to come back and continue their shenanigans with Helldivers, now Ghost of Tsushima, and the whole PlayStation Network account debacle. So we'll start with that one because that was last week's, that was kind of last week's topic, and then we'll go into Microsoft and kind of what I think and how ultimately it seems like the console war is over. It is. And the console war was always stupid. I literally have a Switch, an Xbox, and a PlayStation 5 all right next to each other behind these monitors. So obviously I'm not a purveyor of the console war. You guys know that I prefer Xbox because of the controller, but I got a beastly PC right here that I play a lot of games on as well. I just kind of like the convenience for capturing console, and I think there's a generational divide. So, but before we go into that, let's focus on what's going on here with Sony. So, from Pirate Software, great account. If you don't follow them on X, you really should. Shared this the other day. The Helldivers 2, let's see. Let's make this larger. The Helldivers 2 community was tricked by Sony. Sony declared that having a PlayStation Network account would be, let's make this larger so I can read this better. There we go. Sony declared having a PlayStation Network account would be mandatory to play Helldivers 2. The community revolted and trashed the game's review score to 13% positive. Sony walked it back and stated that they wouldn't be making PSN mandatory, declaring victory. The community, the community undid the massive wave of negative reviews, yet Sony did something sinister in the background. They restricted Helldivers 2 from being purchased in all 177 countries where PSN isn't available. They fooled you, and the devs are still fighting to fix it. So here you can see from this SteamDB, this is where Helldivers is now restricted from being purchased. Now, if you already own it, you're probably, I would assume and hope that you're still okay, or that Steam would do something to cover this. I don't 100% know if that's the case. If somebody does, please let me know. But it just comes down to, it really is amazing to me how, look, I understand that, I made the argument for, deconsolidation of services and decoupling and all that stuff. How we came from an era, especially when it came to cable TV, where we used to pay, maybe 2 or 3 cable providers. Let's say that you'd have a Comcast, a local cable company, and DirecTV in your area. Obviously, DirecTV didn't have satellite internet for a while. When it did, it was garbage. It's nothing compared to Starlink. And then you had like Comcast and then whatever local company. I had like Telemedia or something in a few different places. Atlantic, name them all. A lot of times they're a local monopoly, or if you move into a neighborhood, the builder has just made a deal with them and it's part of your homeowners, or you live in an apartment building and you only have so many choices, et cetera, et cetera. So a big problem in the late 90s and early 2000s, for those of you that weren't around back then, or were we lads and lasses, this was something that a lot of people complained about, having a massive bill of, paying a company like over $100 a month to get your cable boxes. You had to buy a cable box, you had to do all that, or you had to lease it. And it sucked. So when Netflix and other streaming services came out, at first everybody was like, man, this is fantastic. Like we can just get this one thing, and I can eliminate my cable TV and get a few of these services, and maybe it'll cost like, $20-$30 a month. Back when most of these services were commercial free and they were like $7 a month, or $8 a month, or even less in some cases, if you accepted some, shortcomings. So we moved away from that model. Everybody loved it, but now everybody, and we had this discussion a little bit on Epicverse the other night, where, every now content creator, the reason why Netflix was able to get away with this is because they were licensing their content from other content creators, other studios, channels, etc. And so they weren't producing that much of their own content. They were basically leasing it from other people, so the overhead was low. They had a huge library. Well, obviously the original content creators are like, well, I mean, why are we licensing our content to Netflix when we can just do it ourselves? And then they realize how much more difficult it is when you control all the distribution and the production and everything that's associated with that. And it's obviously become a loss, a big loss for most of these corporations. And this will tie into what Microsoft is dealing with as well. So, side scroll game. I'm going to get to the chat here in a second. So, we saw this. We saw the deconsolidation. Now everybody's like, man, I just don't want to deal with this stuff anymore. I'd rather have one account. So it's kind of ironic how the trends have moved. And again, the same thing happened with these game corporations to an extent. Steam was kind of the big repository. But in many cases, these companies open up their own storefronts, or the consoles obviously sell their products digitally. Whatever. So, Sony's just gone down this path now where, it just looks very contradictory, and it looks like it's in bad faith. And ultimately, look, these companies are going to do what they're going to do. So it's up to us to make a difference here because, again, I'm not necessarily opposed, even though it's inconvenient for companies to have different accounts or things like that. I completely understand that. And that's kind of part of competition, right? That, if whoever has the best service and maybe the easiest way to sign up, a lot of times that is a plus in your direction. I've always felt that Microsoft was better than Sony when it comes to online infrastructure and kind of integrating that, because obviously Windows is created by Microsoft, and that's where the majority of PC gaming takes place. So I always thought that integration was more understandable and people would get it. In a lot of cases, Microsoft doesn't even require an account to play a game on PC unless you're doing it via PC Game Pass or trying to do syncing accounts between consoles and PC. So it just seems so asinine and very bitter of Sony to do this because they're ultimately leaving money on the table. Helldivers is a game that for a lot of people came out of nowhere and has been this massive, massive success. It really has been. I mean, even despite everything I saw as streaming it today, he had almost 1,000 people watching him. So it's very popular. I think you guys like it when I play Fortnite more than I do Helldivers, but I do legitimately love Helldivers. I love the music. I love the gameplay. I think it's fantastic. The humor behind it, kind of the fourth wall breaking stuff, and the satire. I really enjoy the game. The gameplay is very solid and a lot deeper than you'd think. And with friends, it's a lot of fun. But to see this happen look, I mean, literally, a lot of these countries are not, they're not like peon countries or anything like that, poor countries. And even if they are, there's like obviously countries in Africa and Asia and things like that in South America. But, people can afford video games in these countries, especially, if they got computers already. Like you're alienating millions of potential customers in emerging markets. Let's be honest. So this is pretty crazy. And some U.S. territories too, like Guam and Puerto Rico, that doesn't make any sense. Like, how does that work? It's pretty crazy. I like how there's a state of Palestine, which doesn't actually exist here. I'm sorry, it doesn't. I just thought I would point that out there. I don't know what that is. That doesn't exist. I guess maybe like Gaza. Oh man, he's getting politically incorrect here. But yeah, it's absurd that Sony would be willing to do this. And ultimately it's about control on their part. They want to be able to control every aspect of their games and how they're distributed and ultimately what they can do with terms of service and their BS, and not that as if Steam is not capable of integrating or helping Sony with moderation and things like that. And again, this is also, we're talking about a game in Helldivers 2 that is a co-op game. So most of the time you're going to play it with your friends. You're not going to play it with randos. And if you're playing with a rando, like honestly, reporting people in online games is usually a pretty punk ass move. I'm just going to say it right now. Like, if you've been playing video games online for as long as I have, and you've been in some Call of Duty or Halo 2 lobbies, you know that people are going to do some serious shit talking. It's going to happen, especially back in the day, which, as usual, you guys always know it's always a Wednesday. Even though sometimes I guess it could be a Thursday. But we're not going to go there. So, you had to have a little bit of a thick skin to play these games and to go online, because everybody was going to psychologically intimidate you, try to get in your head to get that competitive advantage and to get you pissed off. So that's what people did. It was a bunch of dudes talking crap, and if you couldn't handle it and you couldn't hang, then you went home, or you just muted your voice comms. And see, this is where I don't understand a lot of this stuff. It's, you can block people, you can mute people. You don't have to be on voice comms on public chat if you don't want to. Most of the times I'm playing with my friends anyway, so I don't even have public chat open. I don't think I've been in a public chat lobby for like 10 or 15 years, because I'm kind of beyond that stage of wanting to hear a squeaky prepubescent kid, a squeaky voice prepubescent kid like talking crap about my mother. Like, it's like, you know what? I'm beyond that fray. However, I do appreciate the times in the past when I had to deal with this kind of garbage, and the hair it grew on my chest. And you know what? There are plenty of women out there too that hung in these lobbies back in the day and still do today, and they have no problem with it whatsoever. You guys know a lot of them. You guys watch a lot of them. So, the excuse of saying that women, can't handle it either, that's BS. There's plenty that are out there. It's these few softy people out there. So, I mean, in a co-op game, who are you going to report? Like, I don't even care if somebody says something really offensive, like some sort of racial, so I'm just going to mute their ass, and that's it. Boot them out of the game. And I'm done. I don't need to worry about this person again. If they start spamming me with messages, then I block them. Now, if they start switching account names and doing all that stuff, that's a different story. Then you can report them for harassment. But for the most part, you're just going to block and move on if somebody's like annoying the crap out of you. So again, to me, this is not a valid excuse. You're trying to create some sort of solution for for a solution for a problem that you already have a recourse for. So, and then it gets even more ridiculous when you think about the fact that this is now occurring with Ghost of Tsushima. So Ghost of Tsushima, which is a single player game. Now, it's really, really crazy. So here we go. This is the screen share here. So Ghost of Tsushima now has the same purchase restrictions because these are places where PlayStation Network doesn't exist. So I can understand if you want to link accounts in order to have cloud saves between different consoles and PCs and other devices. Xbox has Play Anywhere, super convenient. I've used it plenty of times when I jump from PC to console. If I'm, on the road, I'll take my Xbox Series S with me, and it's great to have it sync up with my desktop and save files depending on the game. I've got the ROG Ally as well, and it's fantastic. They have those saves, and that's a price. That's where I'm okay with losing some of the, dealing with some of the inconvenience of having an account that I may not normally want to have, but it works there. But it's a single player game, man. And let's be honest, a lot of times if you own these games on PlayStation or Xbox already, unless it's like a Game Pass situation, you're probably not going to buy it again on PC, a lot of cases. Unless it's on sale or you're a masochist like me, that you'll do something like that sometimes. But, I think that the only recourse that we have here, if you want, is that we have to do this all over again. You have to go up to Sony and you have to basically say, how many times do we need to teach you this lesson, old man? That every time you have this requirement on PC, that we're going to push back against it. Sorry, I was opening my Steam library there for the next the next part of this discussion. So it's patently absurd that they would have this requirement. So we're just going to have to go in there and tell Sony, like, hey, I'm not going to buy Ghost of Tsushima. I would have loved to play Ghost of Tsushima. I do have a PS5, but that's a game I would love to have played on PC because by all accounts, it's fantastic. And on this PC in particular, it's going to run and look absolutely great. But I'm not going to do it. It's kind of a shame that I got Forbidden West a few weeks ago when it came out on PC, but it is what it is. I love that game. I already do have a PlayStation account because I do have a PS5. So it is what it is. But going forward on the principle alone to make these companies change, I think we do. My stance is definitely hardened on this, especially seeing the shenanigans that they have tried to pull here over the last few weeks. So look, if you want to get these games, I totally get it. I understand that signing up for an account may not be that big of a deal, but I think when you start seeing bad faith actions like what Sony is doing here, it really should give you pause and make you think a little bit more about whether you should buy a certain game or not. But again, I will go back and say, look, these are kind of optional entertainment products. You can do whatever you want. Life is short. I get it. Maybe you just want to play the damn game, not care. I'm not gonna berate you over it, but I will say, like, if you want bad behavior by corporations to change, then you need to punish their bad behavior, and that is hitting them where it matters, and that is ultimately on their bottom line. And it does suck that third-party developers are ultimately the ones that may get hurt here because a publisher like Sony is kind of screwing them over. But this is kind of the price that we have, and maybe in the future. By all accounts, Helldivers 2's like contract negotiations were done over a decade ago. So it's possible that there was a clause written in there that maybe you'd need some sort of account to log into the game, which maybe wasn't a big deal back then. But now with all the negativity that we've had within the games industry, whether it's censorship, microtransactions, random loot boxes, server issues, day one patches, buggy games, throw it all out there, making characters uglier because, some people are offended by beautiful women, apparently. All of these things have been weighing on gamers. And I mean, people are finally tired of it. And honestly, when you have such a vast library at your disposal on the PC, when these companies, make bad decisions, or decisions that are maybe okay for the business, but bad for the consumer, especially when you're talking about a video game brand, which gains loyalty because of entertainment and because of art. It's not a normal business where you're producing a product or tool that has a practical use. You know what I'm saying? Ed Z, it looks like Japan is on there because it's got some sort of weird account restriction, which is weird. I don't know what that's all about. I'll bring that one back. No set price in the following countries. So I'm not really sure what that means. Your guess is as good as mine. I really don't know what that means there. But it would be pretty ironic if they couldn't even sell it in Japan, or if there wasn't like a PlayStation Network account in Japan. That'd be really weird. So maybe somebody knows better than I do. But Steam has stepped up when it comes to the Ghost of Tsushima. Steam is now refunding Ghost of Tsushima for people in the affected countries. This is the letter that or the email that you'll get. So good on Steam for kind of, picking up the slack and doing the right thing while Sony continues with these shenanigans over here. So let's go now to Xbox. So not to be outdone. And after having Microsoft has had a bad decade. Let's be perfectly honest. And this is somebody saying this as an Xbox, I guess fanboy is what you'd call it. Like all my buddies, if you've seen us playing Destiny lately, we're playing on Xbox, and everybody's like, we're kind of the only people that we know that play on Xbox exclusively all the time. So I know there's a few of us out there. Mod extraordinaire, if you see her in the chat. Carla, she plays on Xbox. Zeltroid plays on Xbox too, I know. So there are a few of us out there. There are. We like our controller. But for the most part, Microsoft, Xbox as a brand has been very disappointing. And, you know, it really started with the Xbox One because, you know, I think, you know, I would make the argument that you could make the argument, and I've done it on Tuesday night's main event and other shows in the past. And, you know, some people agree with me, but I know it can be a controversial statement, but I really do think that one of the most beloved consoles of all time, if not the most beloved console of all time, especially for millennials like myself, was the Xbox 360. And it is because it's probably the greatest follow-up console ever. I really think it is, because when the first Xbox came out, it was just basically, well, like every console is, but especially back then, it was a cut down PC. It was like a 700 megahertz Pentium 3 with like a 4 megabyte NVIDIA GeForce like 400 or something equivalent inside of it. So it really was like a stripped down, almost home theater type of PC. It had online capability. It had a hard drive. Those things were a big deal. But the 360 really took things to another level with, you know, having removable hard drives, things like that, multiple controllers. And Ed Z says Rolo dreamed one day to wield a battle rifle and teabag his enemies. Oh, man, that'd be pretty funny. I'm telling you, if there is a civil conflict in the future, we're going to be dealing with meme lords running around, and they're going to be doing crazy crap like that. And you're going to be sad when you have all this amazing, expensive gear, body armor, and all this stuff. But because you didn't get any training, some loser nerd coming out of his mom's basement is going to pop you with a Mosin Nagant and teabag you. And you're going to, and if you were still alive, you'd feel pretty bad about it. So get training. Get training. If you know the reference, good on you. But yeah, get training. Side note. Is this channel going to be dedicated to gaming? I think look, I've thought about this for a long time, actually, that I will probably need to split this channel because YouTube. Now, I have heard that YouTube is being very bad to a lot of people, but if you see like my views, they're all over the place. And so I'm not sure if that's being caused by the fact that this was primarily a political channel most of the time. We had so many episodes of, you know, the previous show, Locked and Loaded Latinos, on here. So I've thought about switching it up, and a lot of things are up in the air. I think eventually I will have to have a political or talk show channel, and then have a gaming live stream channel separately. I just haven't decided if this is going to be the political channel or if the other one is going to be the political channel. There is a Rolo's Rants channel that does exist out there. You can subscribe to it. It doesn't have anything. It was a previous channel that I had that was going to be like a drone footage channel, but you know, I didn't really do anything with it. So you can subscribe to that. I will see because obviously, you know, this is a fairly small channel. It took a very long time to get this channel monetized. So I'm a little bit reluctant to split it, but almost everybody seems to have a talk channel and a game streaming channel. So that may have to be the case one day, Confucius, where I split it, but you guys will get probably 2 or 3 weeks advance notice before I do something like that. And obviously Rumble, Kick, and X are going to remain the same, where they're going to be kind of eclectic and they're going to be kind of the restream sources of all these. So if you do want to support us on a different platform, you can watch us on all those other places for everything. And maybe YouTube is penalizing me for that too. I don't know. It is what it is, right? I do this because I'm passionate about it, and that's why I've always done it. I mean, I love the donations are always appreciated. You know, it's would be great to do this more than just as a hobby. But you know, that's never why I got into this in the first place. It wasn't to be a big time YouTuber or anything like that. I honestly did this for fun and because I care about the causes that I'm passionate about, and that really is the First and Second Amendment. And that's what this channel is all about. It started primarily as a gun channel and trying to show a positive side of gun culture. It's always going to be that, and I will always incorporate both. And I'll always talk about politics as well, because that's another passion of mine. But, you know, I've kind of broadened things. It gives me more things to talk about as well. And I think, politics is always downstream of culture. So I think it's important to talk about these things. It does relate with other things I talk about. Rocket sauce. Holy cow. Dropping 50. Louisiana constitutional carry goes into effect on July 4th, truly marking Louisiana's Independence Day. Long live the Second Amendment. God bless America. God bless Rolo. Long live freedom. Rocket sauce, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. That is amazing. That is absolutely amazing. That is great news. I believe that we're now, more than half of the country is constitutional carry now. So that's a huge achievement. And for those of you that don't know, constitutional carry means that you can have open carry or concealed carry without a license. So, which is great. That's how the founders intended it. I've opened carry before. It is very interesting and intriguing to do. When you're with a big group, it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. I'm not going to lie, to be holstered up and everything like that. But concealed carry obviously has a tactical advantage because nobody knows if you're packing heat. And sometimes that unknown is very effective. So that's great. So, but we will get to the political rants now. I'm actually going to go on a massive rant today about the CCP and how they've essentially bought the U.S. and how the U.S. has conceded to the CCP. So that's where I'm going to push the show after this. Talk a little bit about the U.S. economy, talk about the power grid, and all of those things right there. So we're going to have a little bit of everything here tonight. But I wanted to continue the discussion from the last week, Confucius. So, all right. So, not to be outdone, Microsoft obviously shut down 3 of Bethesda's studios, or 4 of them. Arcane Austin, Tango Gameworks, and Alpha Dog. Now, Arcane Austin had developed Redfall, which was a disaster by all accounts for Microsoft. But again, you were... this is where the mismanagement from these companies comes from, that you had a company that created great games in the Dishonored series, Dishonored 1 and 2, which are... I love those games. They created Prey, I believe, as well in 2016, another game that I was very passionate about. And now they were kind of shoehorned to make a multiplayer online service game. Now, I do believe that they kind of volunteered to try something different. But, sometimes if you allow a company to take a risk, you kind of have to allow them to absorb it too. And I think the Game Pass has completely skewed Microsoft's view on what a profit is and what they're looking for. And I think this has happened with streaming in general, with all these corporations, that they somehow expect to make as much money on new releases, or almost as much money, while still having it on a service that you can pay less than $10 a month for and then just cancel it afterwards. So I think this is pretty absurd and asinine on their part, that they think that they can get away with something like this. Or it's just a set of unrealistic expectations, really. And then you have Tango Gameworks, which was Microsoft's only Japanese studio, which developed Hi-Fi Rush, which was considered by many a success, and by Microsoft's own accounts was something they were happy about. But when you dig a little bit deeper into the numbers, you realize that I believe at around the time that Tango released Hi-Fi Rush, which was last year, they shadow dropped it in January of 2023. There were around 30 or so million subscribers supposedly to Game Pass, but 3 million only downloaded and played Hi-Fi Rush. I didn't play it. I can just admit it. I thought maybe it wasn't my type of game. It looks really good, and maybe that's part of the problem, that some of us just don't get out of our comfort zone when it comes to games, especially when we have a service like this. And it is something that, hey, I think that is an issue. Sometimes we should play different games, especially when we do have a service like Game Pass, watch different things, take advantage of the fact that you have like no risk to do this. I played a game called, something Grace a few weeks ago, and it was like a 3-hour game, and it really told a compelling story about AI and like the collapse of humanity. It was actually pretty compelling in that short time, and it was almost like watching a movie rather than playing a game. But I did enjoy the experience, and it's something that I never would have personally bought, but because it was on Game Pass, I did. And maybe that's something I need to give more of a chance to. But regardless, services like Game Pass are fantastic for the gamers. Rocket Sauce for 5 says, tried twice to discredit China with a super chat. Who's really in charge? Thank you again, Rocket Sauce. I know that's the problem. Who is really in charge here when you can't criticize them? And thank you for the $5, Rocket Sauce. You're killing it. And thank you to Greg and Joe earlier for dropping those super chats. So it really begs the question of what is Microsoft doing? What is their plan? And I feel like they don't even know what their plan is. And Microsoft, Xbox has had no identity over the past few years. They were the kind of the masculine console, so to speak. And we got Hypnotic in the house. What's up, brother? My Boricua brother from another mother. He's been killing it lately. So, Xbox was the dude bro console. It was where men went, or boys in the case of what age you may have been at the time, but where we went to play online. It really was. It had the LAN party community, the online community, the loyalty of the gamer base, even though the Red Ring of Death was killing Xbox 360s en masse. Nobody cared. They loved it. It created a culture within gaming that set the foundation for what we have today. It really was a fantastic console that bred a lot of loyalty. And you would think, and even despite the PS3 technically winning that generation by a slight margin, over the Xbox 360, I think a lot of people, the mind share for Xbox was at an all-time high. And you really thought that if an Xbox 3 or an Xbox 720 was going to come out, then it was going to sell like gangbusters, and there was no way that if Microsoft kept this same model that they had, that they were going to lose. I mean, I really thought that Microsoft was there for the kill. Like the next generation, doesn't matter what the PS4 was going to do, the next Xbox was going to finally beat Sony at their own game or show that they were a true equal. What we got was the Xbox One. That's what we got. We got the Kinect. Microsoft trying to look at what Nintendo was doing with the Wii and gimmicks like that and trying to do something different. Now, the Kinect was a pretty impressive piece of hardware for what it was doing at the time, but making the Xbox One more expensive because it has a piece of hardware that you're really not going to use, and making it kind of a do-it-all box versus a gaming machine was a huge mistake on Microsoft's part. It really was. And then the online requirements, all the things that eventually Microsoft was kind of right about that would happen that we don't necessarily like, but now we've kind of been conditioned to accept them. They threw it out way too soon. This was 11 years ago. And I think that, Microsoft obviously made a huge error there. Oh, and the Xbox One was also slightly less powerful than the PS4. So you're making me pay for a console that has a peripheral that I'm not really going to use, that you haven't really sold me on as being this revolutionary piece of hardware that I must own. And then you've given me an inferior console, so to speak. So, that really destroyed all the momentum that Xbox had going into it. The exclusives didn't work out. A lot of beloved franchises just weren't there the way that we wanted them. Halo Reach was the last hurrah on 360 for Bungie Halo. And after that, things just didn't work. We did have Titanfall there for a year with Respawn, but then they got bought out. And that became multi-platform. I think that could have been a good franchise for Xbox, but they would have ridden that into the ground as well, inevitably. So now we get to the Xbox Series era, the modern era. And, for years we see Microsoft acquiring all these businesses. They buy Bethesda for, $7 billion or whatever. So the Red Ring of Death, I believe, was caused by like inferior thermal paste on the on the main, system chip or the GPU, when they're usually like a combined chip on a lot of these consoles. And they would cause the 360 to overheat and die, essentially. You could repair it in some cases yourself if you went back in there. In other cases, you couldn't, and you just had to buy a new one. I had like 3 of them, personally. But I do know a lot of people that didn't have it. And then newer versions of the 360, like the Slim, the E, or whatever they were called, the Elite, didn't have those issues. So they improved upon them. But it was a huge debacle for a while. So, yeah, some people got lucky. Look, Greg the Goblin says hasn't had one. And I do have a 360 that has never had an issue, and it's one of the OG ones. And I don't know where we've got it. Maybe in Puerto Rico or something. It's like a backup console. We got one of the fat Xbox ones there, too. So, we get to this modern console era, and we really... Microsoft just continues to squander. Game Pass was a great deal, but we don't have the exclusives that are needed. So Microsoft goes and acquires Bethesda and Activision. And, what has that done? We all suspected it was going to be pad Game Pass. Maybe now the whole plan was to go multi-platform. I don't know. But it just looks like Microsoft has had no idea what they're doing. And honestly, because these were 3 Bethesda studios, I'm almost wondering, I'm sure that Microsoft expected the Halo TV show to do a lot better than it did. I don't know how they could have expected that, because the moment that they watched it, they should have known it was utter shit. Like, let's be honest. It's hot garbage, awful. It's a travesty to everything that Halo is. And you had Peter Jackson back in the day wanting to make a Halo movie for you. And you didn't allow it to happen when Halo was at its hottest level. So you could have made great strides back then, and Halo could be a franchise that's still, thriving today. Instead, it stagnated. You created a company solely dedicated to running Halo, and they've done a poor job. I think that it would have done. I think the Coalition's done a better job with Gears of War, but even Gears is not as popular as it used to be. I do think Gears 5 is fantastic. I really do. From a multiplayer perspective, it's great. Horde is incredible. But that game is already a little bit long in the tooth. So again, Gears 6 is not going to save Microsoft, even though it was always kind of the number 2 original franchise to Halo. I would say it was always a distant 2. And that's just because for some people it wasn't a cup of tea. It was ultra violent, which it's what I freaking loved. I mean, the Lancer chainsaw machine gun, like, come on, that's amazing. And it was a huge bro game. Like, let's be honest, it was a toxic masculinity, quote unquote, the game. So, but the women were ultra badass in that game too, and it was crazy to see jacked dudes that are like 300 pounds roided out fighting alongside like skinny blonde chicks who are taking down monsters like they're just as strong as they are. And as absurd as it is, it was great. And I think it actually, surprisingly, it is a franchise that has appealed a lot to women as well. For some reason, every time, I've seen, like, whether it's a cousin of mine or, a significant other, they play Gears of War, they love it. So, I mean, it does have broad appeal, more than you would think. But that's pretty much it. We got Forza as well, but a racing game can't carry a console. Like, let's be honest. That's a little bit of a niche thing. As popular as franchises like Gran Turismo and Forza are, they're not Mario Karts where they have universal appeal. So, Microsoft has kind of squandered what they had, and they haven't moved forward. And I'm not really sure what they're going to do here. It's pretty clear that they've already lost this console war. They don't seem to know what they're doing. They threw one of their executives out there on Bloomberg to the wolves, and she looked like a deer in the headlights when they act about, getting rid of Tango Studios and all of this. And it just makes you wonder what is going on. And I think Microsoft should have known that. I think you needed to look at the trends in streaming and know that, yes, the appeal of Game Pass is that you get, quote unquote, AAA first party games on day one. That's a big deal. That's one of the reasons why I like Game Pass, and I like having the library of other games, that I have access to all the time. Who doesn't? It's really convenient, and it's a well done service. You can even do cloud streaming on a mobile device. You can stream your own console within a Wi-Fi network, and it works actually very well. I've done all of that. But here we are with the two big console makers, the serious ones, where Nintendo's kind of on their own path, and Nintendo always has been. They're kind of insulated from all this stuff because they don't really go multi-platform. They have some mobile games, but for the most part, you have to buy their console, and their console has some sort of gimmick to it. Whether it's the Wii U with the motion controls or the Switch with motion controls and the hybridized, mobile/home console setup that it has. So I need a real nil answer too, Greg. I've got a fake one. It's actually in not here in this house right now. I've got it packed up in storage, but I got to bring it back. There is. I think it's pretty safe to say, especially this is what I was going to do, bring up my Steam library. This isn't even every game that I have. This is just the ones that are installed on my PC right now. And you can just see for yourself, where's my screen share thing? Where's my thingy? Look, I'm sharing myself. Oop. And now I've got myself out here. Look, this is the magic of live TV. So let's not go into infinity here. So, there are a lot of games here that are, look, Baldur's Gate 3. This is on PlayStation and Xbox. I got it on PC. Uncharted, PlayStation exclusive, supposedly. I got it on PC. Horizon Forbidden West. It's on PC. It's a PlayStation game. Cyberpunk runs better on PC than on the consoles. Horizon Zero Dawn, PlayStation game. Helldivers 2, PlayStation game. Spider-Man Remastered, PlayStation game. Battlefront Collection, that's multi-platform, got it on PC. Ready or Not, can't play this on any console, and all the console exclusives are coming out on PC, so this is a PC-only game. All the BioShock's older games, they run better than they ever did on consoles if they don't get some sort of update. VR versions of games that you can't play. Exclusives like Black Mesa. At this point, PC has more exclusives than, Microsoft or Sony do themselves, and that is pretty telling. And then not to mention, management, strategy games, whatever you've got, things that you can't really play on a console. The Stalker series just came out on Xbox for the first time, but the PC version's even better. So this is a franchise that I have to play. I picked these up on sale a couple weeks ago. Got to play them. And then I can go back and play games like Knights of the Old Republic, and it'll run and look better than they do on console. And it just comes down to the fact of why in today's day and age, and I think that there is a generational shift that has gone here, and that is, and yes, and GOG is even better because you're not reliant on Steam and Steam being able to lock you out of your games or things like that. So GOG is even better in a lot of ways, I would argue, and a resource and a storefront that I personally haven't used as much as I should have. So you have all these different options, but the fact of the matter is that, and look, if I'm a Microsoft, fan, I got Game Pass over here. And I've got all these other games here on PC. So pretty much every game that I have on console, I also have on PS3 through Microsoft. So I don't know what Microsoft was expecting. It seems like they just wanted you to play their games wherever you could, And again, it comes down to, look how these companies you can see how they get hurt by this. Because Star Wars Jedi Survivor, when this game came out, it was buggy as heck and it ran horribly on console. I liked the first game in this franchise. I really did. I enjoyed it, but I wasn't going to buy it. It just came out on EA Play, which is included as part of Game Pass a few weeks ago. Now I can play it on PC. It's going to run like a beast. Pal World wasn't on PlayStation. I can play it on PC. I can play it through Game Pass. Starfield, which everyone hates, which I've enjoyed. I won't even lie it. I'm not even afraid to admit how many hours I have in Starfield. 176 hours. There you go. So it's crazy. You can play all of these games on your PC, and it's almost like, why would you not do that? And I think with the rise of streaming, it really has gone to the point where younger generations want a PC because that's what streamers play on. And that's who the best players play on PC. They use keyboard and mouse. They play on PC. You can use your controller for almost every PC game at this point as well. So it's true. Now, can PCs be cost prohibitive? I guess it depends on what you're trying to get out of it. If you're building a PC that runs almost as well as a console at this point, it'll probably cost you around $1,000. But it's a device that you can use for multiple things. You could stream for. I know, how dare I like Starfield Rafterman. It's one of the worst Bethesda games, but it's still pretty good. And it's got some really, really good missions. And I think it looks good, actually. It's actually a good looking game. Yeah, you do have cheating on PC. You do have to worry about that a little bit more. So consoles do have that. But I think it's kind of a nostalgia factor too, where, guys like me and maybe up to, people like 10 years older than me, we really grew up on consoles. They really did. So I think you're starting to see a shift where, younger generations are gravitating towards the PC, ironically enough, and the versatility that the PC has. And honestly, a lot of times the software is where you're going to save your money. Like a Steam sale, the reason why I have such a large Steam library is because I don't have to pay for these games full price. Most of the time I'm paying 50% less, or in some cases 90 to 95% less, especially if you're going to older titles, than I would on a console. Now, consoles have kind of caught up a little bit in their sales because they've had to compete, but on PC, it doesn't matter. There's a storefront that's going to have a sale going on at some point, and you're going to be able to get these games and play them better. You can upgrade your PC piecemeal over time. It is what it is. So I think a lot of times we think of the most high-end gaming PCs, which of course, if you've got like an RTX 4090 or something like that, that costs as much as a PC, itself, just for the video card, let alone building a PC around it, which would be probably $3,000. Which, if you use it for streaming, that's great. It's a business expense. But if you're not, yeah, that's absolutely cost prohibitive. But if you just want the experience of being able to play a game and then tweak it to perform how you want and not be forced to be stuck at 30 frames per second, then PC has its appeal. Now, I say this as somebody who's going to continue to play on console and stream on console all the time, but I understand that there's a paradigm shift going on. And I think devices like the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck are going to only exacerbate this problem as time goes along. So this is it. The console war is over, and PC won. We could argue that Nintendo is the true winner, actually. There you go. Nintendo and PC gamers won. Sony and Microsoft are losing every day, and it's kind of a sad state of affairs. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know. I don't know where this is going to lead, but I think that the PC gaming space is thriving more than ever. And I think ultimately, even though console gaming may not be what it once was, maybe these companies will learn, maybe they won't. And eventually we will get to the point where graphical power on even small devices is so significant that you won't need like a 4090 to run a game with like ray tracing and all this stuff, in like 5 years. You'll be able to run it on a handheld PC. So great stuff. Well, terrible stuff in a lot of ways to see two companies that were so beloved to make such bad decisions. So, it is a problem. I stay on Windows 10. Unfortunately, Windows 11 is going to, it's got all this garbage integrated into it. So there is going to be, PC gaming is going to change too because of Microsoft and all of that. But again, this is why you have the Steam Deck, Steam OS, and other things like that. It's possible that Asus and all these other companies may go that route, and then we're just going to end up with consoles all over again, handheld. So maybe it's just going to be, we're going to come full circle. We're going to go to PC, and then everybody's going to hate the flexibility that the PC gives you, which for some people, flexibility is inconvenience because they want to, there is an appeal to the consoles of not having to worry about anything. It just works most of the time. They're smaller typically. $500 is not cheap, but it's much cheaper than a PC. And you can play it on the comfort of your TV without really too much muss or fuss. So I will always love consoles, but I'm always going to love PCs too. And as an adult with a full-time job and responsible only for myself, I can afford to get these things. So it is what it is. We're going to need Battlestar Galactica levels of tech, a max tech power with minimal connectivity that can be physically removed. Yeah, I think we may, but remember, Battlestar Galactica actually had more primitive tech. And that's why it was protected against the Cylons, because everything was hardwired, no wireless networks. So, robust technology, yes. That's where the Battlestar Galactica factor comes in. Great, my favorite TV show of all time, by the way. The newer one, Battlestar Galactica 2004. So, fantastic. Go watch it if you haven't. And hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Share the show. Support if you want to. I appreciate it. So, we've been on that tangent for a long time. Let's go to more serious business. I found this... I believe, I don't remember who tweeted this out the other day, but this was written almost a week ago, but I think it's apropos. I know a lot of people were focusing on, obviously, what's going on with the Israel and Hamas conflict and the repercussions politically here in the U.S. That entire issue is destroying the Democrat Party. I think the protests have really exposed really the left-wing movement in this country. And I think we've seen how intersectionality has really, really hurt the left and the Democrat Party, because they have embraced so many disparate groups. Now, there's a chance that the Republicans are eventually going to have to do this, because I think our chickens are going to come home to roost too, and it's going to be a lot sooner than we think, because we're already seeing a conservative civil war brewing right now. The likes of the Daily Wire crowd versus the more new, I would say the new right is kind of what you call the millennial right, that is against, foreign interventions and things like that, which I would agree that I typically am. But I will interject here that I think there's a different factor with the Israeli-Hamas conflict. And part of that is that the forces that Israel is fighting have been funded by us, either intentionally or not. We gave $6 billion to Iran in the nuclear deal and all that stuff. So I feel like it's kind of a unique situation where even if you're not into foreign aid, you don't like all this stuff, they're technically an ally, and we've kind of screwed them over by giving money to their adversaries. So this is kind of like one where it's like, well, I've got to throw these dudes a bone. Whether you want to or not. It's a mess that we created, unlike Ukraine, which is a totally different story and a debacle, in my opinion. But that's neither here nor there. I'm not going to talk about the Stormy Daniels stuff either. I don't like getting into legal cases. You guys should already know how I feel about all these cases against Trump. I did hear that Bill Maher actually had an interview with Stormy Daniels where she basically completely contradicted I personally liked the Battlestar Galactica finale. I think it could have been a little bit better, but the spiritual subplot of Galactica never bothered me, and the more that years have gone by, the more that I like it. I think Battlestar Galactica's fourth season was a little bit weaker because of the writer's strike that was happening at the time. So I think that they wanted to flesh certain things out that had to do with that. But, they did the best they could. It wasn't the best ending that it could have had, but it worked for me, and I've appreciated it more as the years have gone by. So that's how I feel about that. So that's just without going into spoilers or anything like that. But I always did find the spiritual aspect and underpinnings of Galactica, especially the contrast between the Cylon and the human religion, pretty fascinating, that dichotomy there. So, we've been seeing all these conflicts. We've been seeing, like, Bill Maher, I guess, he came out with a recording from a show in 2018 where he talked with Stormy Daniels, and she basically contradicted her entire testimony that she gave in court this week. So what is the truth and what isn't, I don't know. But it seems like her credibility has been torpedoed here. And coming from Bill Maher is pretty funny if that is the one who ends up helping Donald Trump in this case. It's going to be pretty ironic. Not what I would have expected. If you want to know what I think that case is going to end in a hung jury, to be honest. That's personally what I think. But, that's pretty much it. I'd go watch Legal Mindset or Nick Rekieta or any of the other great legal channels out there for that kind of advice or for that kind of analysis. It will be better than me. I'm just an engineer, for goodness sakes, that likes to shoot guns. But I will talk about this because you guys know I've always harped on the CCP and how I think that they're the greatest adversary that the West and the United States has ever faced, because they don't make the same mistakes that our adversaries in the past have made, and they have patience that we in the United States and in the greater Western civilization do not have. So this article is from Real Clear Politics, written by James E. Fannell and Bradley A. Thayer. Embracing communist China was the U.S.'s greatest strategic failure. From the war in Ukraine to the horrific terror attack on October 7th and... let me full screen this again for me. Sorry. Projector. Sorry, total noob. Okay. Boom. To the horrific terror attack on October 7th and the subsequent conflict in the Middle East, to the roiling waters of the South China Sea, the world today is in crisis. The causes are not found in Moscow or Tehran alone, but primarily in Washington and Beijing. They are the consequence of two fundamental and interrelated grand strategic mistakes made by the U.S. First, the failure to understand the threat from the People's Republic of China, and second, the failure to balance against it. As a result, the U.S. is at risk of losing its dominant position to an emboldened PRC working in cooperation with Vladimir Putin's Russia and the mullahs in Iran. How many times have I emphasized this? How many times have I talked about, going into Iran and, creating an opportunity for China and Russia to swoop in and create a three-front conflict that, because our allies are so weak, we would probably have a lot of trouble dealing with, especially because cyber warfare is going to be a major factor and asymmetric warfare are going to be major factors in any conflict that we undertake against these three adversaries, but especially China. Surveying the global unrest, Americans must comprehend three reasons why they face this dire strategic landscape. First, U.S. elites did not perceive the threat due to the triumphalism of the end of history. The false assertion that modernizing nations like China were on the path to democratization and free market economics. Great power conflict was seen as an artifact of the past. This hubris contributed to what we term as quote-unquote threat deflation, where year after year, U.S. decision makers consistently dismissed or underestimated the threat from the PRC. Second, U.S. business interests and financiers indefatigably, one of my favorite words, sought economic gain from cooperation with Beijing. This facilitated China's rise as it entered the West's economic ecosystem, as did its admission to the World Trade Organization. Their influence on the major U.S. political parties and at the highest levels of U.S. politics hindered the U.S. response and promoted the conceit of globalization. Thus emerged an quote-unquote engagement school, which asserted that by engaging the PRC, it would become wealthy, a quote-unquote responsible stakeholder in the international order, and even democratic. In essence, the U.S. willingly and enthusiastically taught, trained, and even equipped its mortal enemy. Business interests and financiers funded our national security think tanks, which contributed to a bias towards the engagement school, and thus the threat deflation of the People's Republic of China. Third, Deng Xiaoping, arguably one of the greatest strategists of the 20th century. I believe he was the premier before Xi Jinping, or maybe two premiers before. I think he was the one before. Advanced a brilliant political warfare strategy to promote threat deflation. Deng's strategy focused on U.S. and other Western elites, enriching them and shaping their perception of the PRC and of the Chinese Communist Party while using the enticement of a growing market to influence their behavior. For a generation, Chinese leaders masked their intentions and framed their expansion as economic, for the good of all, rather than strategic and for the benefit of the CCP. Consequently, the PRC has risen and now employs its power to the detriment of U.S. national security through its worldwide actions, especially in the East and South China Seas and Taiwan, as well as through its proxies in Iran and Russia. Well, let me see here. Lost that. Okay. To meet this threat, Washington first needs to see communist China for what it is, an aggressive power which seeks the overthrow of the United States. Second, the U.S. must support the education of strategists so younger generations may understand how to defeat the PRC. Education and the principles of power politics and the CCP's ideology are essential to achieve victory. I think that one of the greatest disservices that we have in the United States is that we're not taught Eastern history. We have European history. It is understandable. The U.S. was established by, Western European colonists, but much of the world's great history was in Asia, and especially in the early Chinese empires, Japan, Korea, all those nations that have been around for nearly 1,000 years, predating the West and surviving past the fall of the Roman Empire and creating technologies that we didn't know about. I think it's extremely important to know how they think and what their histories are in order to understand who we're dealing with, because they have completely different cultures and ideologies than we do, with a long standing history and a tendency to think much more long term than we do. There are things that China is doing to get revenge for events that occurred over 100 years ago. The U.S. would never think that way. We don't even, we can barely get past what we're going to do during the next election cycle. And of course that happens because we have a political system in which we elect our officials every 2, 4, or 6 years. So there's going to be a lot of turnover and a lot of politicking involved. But that does not excuse the fact that we have been, asleep at the wheel when it comes to this threat, or intentionally assisting an enemy to enrich ourselves in the case of our politicians and corporations. Okay, third, there must be, so yes, I agree. Young people need to learn more about China, their culture, and why they are where they are today, and why the CCP is evil, and why Maoism is one of the worst disasters and tragedies of the 20th century, with 60 million people dying in famine in China alone. And again, it goes back to the failure of the U.S. to assist allies in key junctures. So after World War II, China was one of our biggest allies in World War II, fighting against the Japanese, and they'd been oppressed and, suffered genocide at the hands of the Japanese for over a decade. And, so we ran to stop the Chinese in Korea, but it was already too late. We needed to stop the CCP from taking over China, and we needed to support, the democratic movements that were going on post World War II, before the CCP was able to take over, and Mao ran his enemies to Taiwan, and Chiang Kai-shek and the more Western friendly government. Now, by many accounts, Chiang Kai-shek and his government were weak and corrupt. And that is why Mao was able to take advantage and rise the peasant class up against the existing government, especially in a post World War II era, which was devastating. So, these are all the things we need to learn. It's a lot. And I think history is actually more essential than, I think basic math, let's be honest, is good enough for most people to handle their finances. I think you should almost take economic math more than anything else, especially when you're in high school. Leave a lot of let's be honest. When do you use algebra or calculus in everyday life if you're not an engineer or in the sciences? Never. You will never use it. I've never used algebra in my life. in my everyday life, even in doing some engineering work. I have used calculus, I've used other things, but at the same time, we have computers and calculators that help us solve a lot of these problems now, and they do it in a better way. So is it good to understand? Do you want engineers that understand these things? Absolutely. You don't need your normal business person or somebody that's working an office job or doctors to know these things. So I think we need to reprioritize the education system in some ways and teach actual skills that will allow you to be independent, learn how to balance your budgets, your credit cards, and all this stuff. Of course, they don't want you to learn how to do all that because they want you to be in debt up to your eyeballs and not be self-sufficient. But that's another story for another day. So yeah, I do think it's important to learn history, to teach math that is actually practical in its application. And then you can let the colleges deal with, teaching you more advanced math, in my opinion. Obviously, if you're ahead, you can do that. But I think that with today's, credit card debt soaring, with prices that are going through the roof, Microsoft even admitting the consumers were broke and trying to tweak their menu to bring their prices down. I think teaching people how to handle their budgets is a lot more important than them learning how to work with imaginary numbers and things like that in high school. I don't think it's that much of a priority. Call me crazy, but that's what I think. Teach people how to be more independent, because even if they go to college and they're working part-time jobs, those are skills that will allow them to not necessarily fall in debt and make a better decision about going to college. As if these protests have probably dissuaded a lot of people from going to college now in the first place, because they can see the cesspools of progressive politics that they are today. But, that's neither here nor there. So yes, the education on our adversaries and on practical matters is extremely important. Is that a change that we're going to see? I highly doubt it. It's going to take massive changes from the Department of Education, or the states forcing the Department of Education to change, or the Department of Education being dismantled and changed in some sort of way. Who knows? I don't know what the solutions there are. Teachers unions being restricted too, so that we don't teach bullshit like transgenderism and all that in schools. So that's a bigger issue than this discussion. But those are all things that we need to deal with in order to defeat China. But it may be too late. These are changes that we have to make no matter what, because we may still come out of the issues that we're facing today and have to solve them in the future. But they also may not be. We may be in a position where we've already weakened ourselves so much that our decline and collapse is inevitable. I don't know. I hope not. It's true, Confucius. Kids don't even know how to balance their bank accounts or pay bills, and they're still graduating. Yeah, so I think that is more important than any abstract math or bullshit liberal arts that you can teach people. Actually teach them how to live in the way that this society is, and then learn about history so they can become better stewards of this country itself, because we have to be able to take control and become the leaders of this country. That's ultimately what we are. The mantle of responsibility is passed from the older generations to the younger, and we need to have the knowledge in order to make the right decisions and not squander what we've been given, or to fix what previous generations have squandered themselves. So, all right, back to the article. Third, there must be sustained presidential leadership to define the enemy, educate the American people, and generate the necessary whole of government response. Fourth, the failure of the intelligence community to identify China as an existential threat greatly weakened the ability of American national security decision makers to identify and act against the threat. The fundamental assumptions regarding China's behavior were informed by the engagement school of thought. Ultimately and perversely, the intelligence community was aiding threat deflation for a generation. This must be reversed. Fifth, U.S. military leadership did not recognize and prepare for China's emergence as a formidable military power. It must also be held accountable for the current state of unpreparedness, specifically the failure of the U.S. Navy's leadership to recognize the centrality of the maritime domain to the PRC's grand strategy and its naval modernization efforts stands in stark contrast to proactive performance of prior generations of admirals from World War II through the Cold War with the Soviet Union. Leadership needs to prioritize rebuilding the U.S. Navy to meet the PRC threat. The U.S. aided the rise of its enemy. Now the Kremlin and Iran are operating in the strategic space that the PRC provides them. That space and Beijing's aggression will only increase if the U.S. does not act to end its threat deflation, break the chokehold of the engagement school on the U.S. foreign policy establishment, and defeat the CCP by evicting it from its power. Evicting it from power. So this, I thought this was a great article. It's kind of short, sweet, and to the point. But it, everything rings true. Opening up China economically, with that Henry Kissinger and the Nixon administration did, was a disaster. And this is something that sometimes we do. Hindsight is 20/20, right? But I think that we should have seen. I think a lot of people always underestimated China. I think that a lot of leaders in the West thought that they were backwards and that they had no chance, because when Mao did his great leap forward, they were making inferior steel in like little furnaces that farmers built, on their own land, and people laughed about it, like Chinese products are inferior, their steel sucks, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, I don't know how we can get away with saying that today. Obviously, yes, a lot of Chinese products are inferior to American products, but they also have most of the factories that are building the products that are designed by American corporations. So they have the industrial infrastructure to create good products because they're using the schematics that the West has given them, because of requirements of U.S. companies doing business there to give up some of their trade secrets and things like that. Computers are made in China. Game consoles are made in China. A lot of microchips that are basic are made in China. There are some chips that the Chinese make themselves that are almost as good as some of the things that Qualcomm and Apple are making in their, like Oppo and OnePlus phones. So I think we underestimate China to our own detriment. They're also one of only 2 other countries that has launched their own space station by themselves. They have a space station. They have their own space program that's pretty proficient and advancing at any moment. They're upgrading and growing the size of their ICBM arsenal. And they've tailored their military specifically to fight against the United States and our allies. Whereas we've tweaked our military to fight insurgencies in the Middle East. And we wasted 20 years there re-gearing our military for desert combat against asymmetric forces that we allowed our peer state adversaries to catch up to us, and in some cases dictate the tactics of the future with drone warfare and cyber warfare. So am I confident that the U.S. could defeat any one of these adversaries? Sure. I think that we could defeat China. But again, China, we got to bring up the map here, because I love bringing up the map. So let's show how this is. And I'm sure I've done this before with the island chains, but I think it's pretty important to see here. So let's see. Let's just go to maps here. Apple Maps, why not? Just came up. All right. So when we're dealing with China from a strategic perspective, you have to understand that, we're all the way over here, right? We really are. Like, this is where we're at. So now we have a lot of forces stationed everywhere. Like, China is surrounded by U.S. allies and bases right now. So we have what's called the first and second island chains. So the first island chains are what you see here, which would be, obviously Taiwan, the Japanese islands, the Philippines, Indonesia, and all of this going through right here. So this is kind of the first line of defense that Taiwan would be the linchpin behind, and why we don't want to lose Taiwan. This keeps China isolated and contained, which obviously from China's perspective is terrible. They don't want this at all. They really don't. So let's kind of flip this compass to a different viewpoint so you can kind of understand this better. Is it going to actually let me do it? I don't think so. It's not Google Maps. So let's just go to Google Maps. We can flip the script here. So let's get out of Florida, and here we go. So I don't know if they'll let me flip it here either, scroll it, but it's a little bit easier to see. So we have our island chains here. We kind of have China isolated. China is very reliant. Now they've been increasing their reliance on coal and other things for strategic purposes, obviously. So really China needs oil for their military. They have been switching to electrical cars and coal power plants for their domestic power production and building nuclear power plants as well. And part of that is not because they care about the environment. Obviously, building coal plants isn't, but because they don't want oil to be used by the civilian population in case they go to war with the United States. So that's a pragmatic reason for them and a logical reason for them to disincentivize fossil fuel vehicles, but they're still using fossil fuels to power them. So China obviously doesn't have its own oil. There really isn't too much oil here. We do suspect that in the Spratly Islands, which are located here in the South China Sea, that there's a massive oil deposit there. And that is why China has been trying to claim the entire South China Sea. If you see some photos, you'll see what's called the 9-dash line, which extends China's territorial borders to all of the South China Sea, even though that's patently absurd because you have Vietnam, the Philippines, and Indonesia and Malaysia all here. And clearly they would have claims to at least some of this territory, or China wouldn't. And China uses their fishing fleets to intimidate other countries and basically as an extension of the People's Republic Army Navy, the PLAN, to terrorize and berate other nations and steal their natural resources like fish. So, and they've built artificial islands in this area that have essentially become unsinkable aircraft carriers and, strategic bases with which they can launch cruise and ballistic missiles at the U.S. Navy. So we're building new military bases and reactivating bases in the Philippines. Philippines is going to be a massive strategic ally when it comes to this. Obviously, Japan has upped their military budget to the point where they may be the third biggest spender in the entire world after the U.S. and China very soon. But a lot of this is going to take years. Australia is buying nuclear submarines. It's going to take them years to get them. Like Australia is not going to be able to do very much for us for at least 20 years. And I don't think we have that much time. I think China is seeing the writing on the wall. The U.S. is about as weak as we're going to get while, not having physical assets in the area or having stronger allies. So right now, it would basically be us against China one-on-one, and we would be fighting in their territory, which even though we've got these bases here, our allies aren't that powerful at this moment. Submarine warfare is going to be a huge part of that. Part of the problem, though, with submarine warfare is that the South China Sea is notoriously shallow. So submarines will be operating in a space where there's a lot of noise, and they may not be able to keep themselves as stealthy as they would normally be. Now, the linchpin to the first island chain defense, the second island chain defense goes further out to like Guam and all this stuff. So we'd go, further here, and then even Hawaii would be kind of a last line of defense. But if we're in Hawaii, like we're done. We've lost Southeast Asia at this point. Is here, which is the Strait of Malacca. So the reason why it is a big deal right now with everything that is going on is that obviously China gets most of its oil from the Middle East, like a lot of people do. So you've got oil coming out of the Persian Gulf. It flows through here and goes through the Strait of Malacca and into China. All the U.S. Navy needs to do is block the Strait of Malacca, which right here we can see using the legend. You guys can't see it there. Is only about, it's like 20 miles, 20 or 30 miles. So if you have a carrier battle group here, or you've got submarine blockade, like that's it. You can prevent the Chinese merchant fleet and oil fleet from being able to resupply China. So this is a serious problem for them. This is why they need to take the South China Sea and the natural resources there, why they need Russia as an ally to buy oil from them, and why they need to break through Taiwan, break through the first island chain, and be able to go around and out into the Pacific. And then eventually threaten Australia as well, because right now they have to go around Australia and all that stuff, and they don't have to deal with that. So this is why it is so critical to hold the line here and to empower our allies against China. Because again, we're also going to be fighting on their territory. Like a few of these islands right here near Quanzhou, I believe that's how you pronounce it. Some of these are owned by Taiwan, believe it or not, and they're like right off the coast of China. So, the first sign that you're going to see something is, will China pull what Russia did in 2014 with Crimea, where, they took back the fleet, the Black Sea Fleet headquarters, and they took Crimea from Ukraine, and the West did nothing about it, but say, Putin's bad, you shouldn't have done that, and that's it. Same thing with Georgia. When they took portions of Georgia during the Bush administration. So will China make a move on a few of these islands, take them over and occupy them and test the West? I think that they will. It'll be pretty interesting to see now. The amphibious invasion, the amphibious assault that China is going to have to undertake here to take Taiwan is going to be the greatest amphibious assault in the history of mankind. That's what it's going to take. It will be unparalleled. It will make D-Day look like child's play. It really will. The amount of resources that the Chinese are going to have to put to bear in order to, first of all, cross the Taiwan Strait, which is like 60 miles. It's going to be massive. They're going to be taking fire the whole way there. They're going to have to send everything at once. Everybody's going to see the buildup. They're going to use everything. They're going to use their Navy. They're going to use their merchant marine fleets. They're going to use it all. They're going to fire thousands of missiles across the strait, fire thousands of artillery rounds and rockets from the mainland. And Taiwan is not going to be a slouch either. They're going to do a lot of stuff. Taiwan actually is pretty crazy because you've got the lowlands here on the West Coast, which is obviously the ideal spot for China to conduct an amphibious assault. Everything else on the other side is very mountainous and not populated. You can see that there are barely any roads that go through there. A lot of Taiwan's military and air bases are embedded in mountains here to be protected. But China has shown and flown aircraft around that, and they've even done like basically mock attacks on the east coast of the island, preparing for that because they know that's what they'd have to do. Japan actually owns these islands over here, which is pretty interesting. And Japan has been militarizing these islands. Actually, Yonaguni and Takatomi, I think, already have garrisons on them. And Yonaguni, being so close to Taiwan, is being reinforced as well. Excuse me. So these are going to be extremely important islands in the coming years for Japan and even for us in order to repel any sort of attack on Taiwan. So, whether we actually want to do that or not. I think that it's going to be interesting how things play out here. Again, we have to bring almost everything that we have to this fight. They have created their entire military to be able to counter U.S. carrier battle groups. And I mean, I think a war with China, depending on how it's played, especially if we have the inferior military leadership that we have shown over the last couple of decades, it'll be interesting. It will be interesting. I don't know how we'll bring our forces to bear here because we rely so much on carrier aviation in order to succeed. So I just don't know what we can do. I feel like the threat of standoff weaponry that China has, especially because most people may not know this, but the U.S. Navy relies on the Aegis air defense system to track and shoot down aerial threats on destroyers and a few of the cruisers that we have left. It uses scanned array radar and the standard missile system to fire down anything from drones to ballistic missiles in space. And it's a very effective combat system. And we saw the latest iteration with the Standard Missile 3 shoot ballistic missiles out from space. You could say that the strike that Iran attempted on Israel was the first well, like the second space battle that we've ever had in human history, because a lot of the engagement was in low Earth and upper atmosphere. So that's kind of unprecedented. And the Israelis were able to shoot down a ballistic missile with an F-35, and technically that ballistic missile was in space coming down. So that's something that we'll have to deal with China. But here's the problem. Each U.S. Navy Arleigh Burke-class destroyer can carry around roughly 100 missiles. But those missiles are split between offensive and defensive weaponry. Makes sense. We got to be able to try to sink enemy ships. So you're thinking maybe 50 missiles. I think in a war with China, we'd probably stack it so that we're really defending and not really going offensive with our ships. So we'd probably be in a high air defense loadout. But here's the crazy part. Did you know that U.S. Navy Arleigh Burke destroyers cannot be resupplied at sea? They have to go back to a base in order to reload their missiles. And now the U.S. Navy is scrambling to try to find a way to reload these ships without a port and at sea. Because you can imagine that we send, 3 or 4 carrier battle groups, almost half or a third of the U.S. battle group force to take on China, most of the Pacific Fleet, as far as air power to take them out. And our ships, the escorts have to, after maybe 1 or 2 major engagements, they got to bail out. And then that's it. They've got to go reload and go to Guam or something like that. So it is crazy. China is being allowed to buy farms in the U.S., Confucius, because the U.S. allows anybody that has money to buy our shit. That is all there is to it. And it is because we believe in the free market so much that we allow our enemies to undermine us. And this is where I am completely against and completely non-libertarian in this. I absolutely think that we should put restrictions on Chinese companies and even Chinese nationals that are not U.S. citizens, but that's why they try to get birthright citizenship right all the time here, from buying property in the United States. Good luck trying to pass a law that does that. Good luck dealing with all the lawsuits that you're going to have and all that stuff. I don't think it's going to happen. We're not capable of doing that. So that's why they're doing it, because they can and because we will never do anything about it, Confucius. That's why they're doing it. And they don't allow us to do the same thing. We can't go in there and just buy property like that. The Chinese government owns everything. So that's why it's going on, because the American people have not paid attention to this threat, and their money is too damn good. And that's ultimately what most people, especially politicians and corporations, care about in the U.S. They care about the money. That is it. All they care about is the freaking money and not being called racist or bigoted. That's what it is. And the image of denying people of one race, because essentially that's how it's going to be spun, because the Chinese know exactly how they will spin this. They will say America continues its racist policies by not allowing Chinese people, discriminating against Chinese people, and even Chinese American citizens to an extent, because they'll just keep sending more people to have children here and then have them as embedded as spies. So I think that's why we have to go with Vivek Ramaswamy's interpretation of birthright citizenship, not the anchor baby BS. Because anchor babies, they're total bull crap. Like, we have to eliminate that. I think there needs to be an amendment to the Constitution to clarify that, even though I think when you hear Vivek's explanation on birthright citizenship, the existing constitutional, the existing way that the Constitution is written can still be used. But I think we almost need an amendment to really clarify that and say, just if you're born in the U.S. to like foreign parents, you don't become a citizen. That's total BS. I'm sorry. Most countries don't do that. It's asinine, and it causes too many people to try to get to the U.S. to have children. And it's leading to our immigration crisis, and it's allowing our adversaries like Iran and China to be able to have, basically spies that are American citizens here. So this is this is where we're at. And again, good luck trying to change the government's mind on this. It's going to take, this is unfortunately one that's going to need to come from the top, and it's going to require a change in leadership. A President Trump, a Vivek Ramaswamy that understands this threat too. There are any of these politicians that have been, sounding the trumpet on China and the threat of the CCP. And we need to be aware too. American corporations, American farmers, you have to resist Chinese corporations buying your stuff. And I get it. They will spend what they have to spend to do it. And most people will never be able to say no to that. And that's going to be ultimately the problem. How do you say no to millions of dollars? You don't. And that's why ultimately we're going to lose. And that's why it comes down to having a sense of patriotism and having a moral code. And that's why anytime anyone asks me, what is the solution to our problems? They hate my answer because it's an abstract answer, but it's the truth. We have immoral leadership and an immoral citizenry in this country. And what I mean by that is that we're focused on ourselves. We're extremely selfish. We're greedy. And we would rather beat each other in our own heads. We don't help our neighbors anymore. We don't have any sort of unifying code that binds us together. We're all split apart. Part of that is because of what's happened in our society. Part of that is that our own politicians have pushed us. A lot of it is that our adversaries have been trying to destroy us because they know that the U.S. is a superpower that is so dominant that only we can destroy ourselves. We are completely isolated here in this world. We have two friendly allies, or two friendly countries to the north and the south of us, which if we want to block off Mexico, we really can if we want to, and prevent illegal immigration. We have access to the two largest oceans in the world. We have a massive navigable river that goes down almost the center of our country in the Mississippi, which makes it very easy for us to move supplies and goods from the north to the south before we even need to worry about airplanes and things like that. We have natural resources up the wazoo. We have every type of climate that exists in the world if we take into account, Alaska and Hawaii. There is no country that has ever existed that is as OP as the United States. And we are squandering our strategic advantage and our geographic, our economic, and our resource advantages every single day. And our adversaries understand what we don't. And that is the United States can only be defeated from within. And our politicians and our leadership are sowing the seeds of our own demise. And that's pretty much it. That's what it comes down to, ladies and gentlemen. That's what it comes down to. It comes down to that. So we have to be aware. We need to choose leaders that understand that this is going to be the threat. And we do need to try to untangle ourselves from a lot of these foreign conflicts in order to prepare for what may be the conflict with China. And look, I don't want any foreign intervention. I don't want wars. We need to bring back chip manufacturing to the United States. We need to bring back, all of our, infrastructure and manufacturing to the United States. Without doing that, we will ultimately, we're going to fail. We're going to fail here. The problem is it too late? Because it's going to take us, in some cases, decades to get some of these industries back. Manufacturing plants, chip facilities, all that stuff. We need to leverage the U.S. military technology when it comes to some of that stuff, since they have a lot of proprietary technology that the civilian sector does not have access to. We're going to have to leverage that in order to bump up our technology without relying on Taiwan. We need to sell weapons to our allies in the region. We do. I'm okay with selling weapons to people. I don't want to give stuff away, but we can sell our guns. Like, I'm all for selling guns to people. It's totally fine. We're capitalistic, right? The military industrial complex can be a terrible thing, but I guess if we sell to our allies, it is what it is. We want to try to avoid conflicts. And part of it is buffing ourselves up. It really is. It's peace through superior firepower. Ultimately, if we show strength, if we're able to get our allies in order, we establish our bases in that area, and we stop our shenanigans here, China's going to know, yeah, there's not much we can do here. We're basically hosed right now. Like, we can't take down the U.S. So those are the things that we need to do. And it's going to start with good leadership and consumers demanding that we have to buy American any way that we can. And in today's economy with inflation and everything going on, it's going to be tough. We are suffering at the death by 1,000 cuts right now in the United States. And it is extremely difficult to put Band-Aids on all of that. It really is. And that's where we are. Dirty Jersey for 8 months. Member for 8 months. The federal government is an irreparably corrupt and illegitimate entity run by criminals. We all know it no matter what side of the aisle you're on. That may be the case. And again, we may be done. And then if we're done this way, the entire world is done. Like, let's be honest. I've talked about this scenario before many times on this channel, that if the U.S. falls into some sort of civil conflict, then that civil conflict is probably going to lead directly into World War III, and it will lead to the collapse of the West, because a disunified U.S. that is balkanized and split into several different countries will be exploited by our enemies. The left-wing states will be occupied and influenced by China, which will become the new superpower. And I think, unfortunately, and I know Ripa, Eric July will hate this argument, but I really do think that we cannot balkanize and split in the U.S. right now. It will literally destroy the entire world if the U.S. splits into several different nations. And I just don't think that we can do it. It will literally lead to the end of Western civilization, and Western civilization may end anyway because of the horrible decisions that we have made and that the things that we've allowed the elites to do. So it's possible that we're in the end game now and that we've already lost. Like, the checkmate move was made, decades ago when we decided to go into Iraq when we shouldn't have, instead of focusing on Afghanistan, finishing that conflict as quickly as possible, and then re-gearing our military for a pure state conflict. And obviously losing the trust of the American people along the way, and reducing the credibility of the U.S. military, which was historically the most trusted entity within the federal government. So we've done everything to undermine ourselves, and our adversaries have taken advantage of that and pushed it to the finish line, almost to the finish line. Can we win? Can we succeed? Yes. I think you can't. One man is not your savior. So can Donald Trump or another president stop this? I mean, I think he's going to do a hell of a lot better job than Joe Biden than he did before, but the man's only going to be around for 4 years, even if we get him, and our enemies are willing to wait. So what do we do? I'm not sure. So we'll have to figure this out one way or the other. The 21st century is going to be very interesting, and it was the Chinese proverb that said, "May you live in interesting times," and it doesn't necessarily mean good times. And remember, good times create weak men. Weak men create bad times. Bad times create strong men. We're in the weak men create bad times stage of that. And ultimately, we're going to pay the consequences. So that's what I have for you today. That was episode 16 of Rolo's Rants. See, Confucius, I got it. I went in reverse this week, but we still have the rants. We still have plenty of stuff. We did start with the bears and the guns with the show today. Then we talked about Sony and Microsoft's continued debacle and how they've lost the console war to PC gamers and to a large extent Nintendo. And we rounded it out with the U.S. government selling us out to the CCP. Be back next week for episode 17. Same bad time, same bad channel. You can catch me at the usual streams this week. I know we've been doing some weird stuff with the Destiny and Dark Souls. This week we'll try to keep our schedule the same. I will do a poll about Friday because it seems like you guys like Fortnite more than Helldivers, at least when I play it. Maybe I think that we're just too professional when it comes to Helldivers and there's no shenanigans. So it just gets a little bit boring, but I don't know. Let me know. If not, we'll do Fortnite 2 nights in a row like we used to on Thursday and Friday. So come hang out on Thursday at 5:45 p.m. for Fortnite. I'll be on Epic Verse afterwards, usually at 8 p.m. on the Epic Verse channel with Josiah, Epic Mike, Benology, and Rough Night. Friday, we'll be back for our second gaming stream, which will be at 6 p.m. until 9 p.m. Then Saturday at 11 a.m. I will continue Dark Souls, and that's kind of become the single player Saturday. So that's what I've got. Thank you all, everybody. Again, happy Mother's Day. Thank you all for the super chats. Shout outs to everyone that gave today. Josie 1818, Greg the Goblin, Rocket Sauce, Dirty Jersey for re-upping as a member. I appreciate all of you. God bless you. God bless America. Have a great week, and we will catch you on the next one. Thank you, everybody, and take care.